Hey everyone, ErikOnPaper here, and guess what? I'm Erik. So I got a really interesting request a little while ago from Moy Delgado, who wanted me to do the hypothetical villains that would have existed in Tim Burton's Batman Forever if they had made that version. So, being a big Billy Dee Williams fan, I couldn't resist drawing Billy Dee Williams as Two-Face. Since this video would have been super long, I cut out the preliminary drawing. If you've seen some of my other portraiture videos, like of actor Bill Reed Jr. or from Spider-Man 4, you get the idea of how I set it up. But what I did was I found a photograph of Billy Dee Williams from the original 1989 Batman, and then I combined that with the makeup that Rick Baker and V. Neil were working on for Two-Face. Now, that ended up on Tommy Lee Jones, of course, but one thing that Baker wanted to do that the studio nixed because I think they said it would have been too scary was Two-Face's iconic giant eye. Now, I don't know about you, but I kind of like my villains scary, but I guess they were concerned about selling toys or merchandising to kids and things like that. So anyway, I combined these two makeups and tried to make it fit onto Billy Dee Williams' face and structure. Now, I always thought that it was really unfortunate that Billy Dee Williams didn't continue on in the part, because he would have been a great Two-Face, and that's the main reason he took the part in the first film anyway. Now, I know that he did provide the voiceover lines for the Lego Batman movie, and that's cool and all. And yes, I think Tommy Lee Jones is an amazing actor. I just think that Billy Dee Williams would have been far more menacing in the role, if I'm to be perfectly honest. So when I was doing the face and drawing and adding in the details, the first thing you do is you get the outline and facial structure to work before you add any rendering lines, because you can beautifully render an eye or part of the mouth or a cheekbone or whatever, but if it's not in proportion to the rest of the face, then you just wasted a lot of time rendering a really pretty section of a drawing. And I am still checking myself. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but that's something I've learned from experience. And this is going to be a multi-stage drawing. Before I had done a lot of the work where you'd seen it in the portraitures where I only did it with Copics or did it with Copics and colored pencils, but I really wanted to get some inking done. And I kind of missed using my microns. For those of you who've been watching, you'll notice I used the quill a lot. Unfortunately, because I knew I wanted to dye the paper with Copics, the type of ink that I use, the alcohol and the Copic markers would activate it, causing these ugly black smears all over the drawing, and in a way that inking over microns doesn't have that effect. So just a fair warning. Now, with your microns, I don't waste ink filling in a lot of the heavy areas with fine tools such as brushes and things like that. If it's meant to be a solid black area, like his eyebrows, his mustache, or some of the dark shadows of his clothing. But along the areas where you can still see light, then I go in with a lot of heavy cross-hatching, mainly because cross-hatching is a lot of fun to do. I keep saying, if you're an artist and you're having a bad day, just cross-hatch it. You can get your aggression out, and also if you've been having a pretty good day cross-hatching, then you're having a great day. Okay, so another interesting thing here too is that the light source of the reference photo I had of the Two-Face makeup is different than the light source on the Billy Dee Williams photograph. The photograph of Billy Dee Williams that is the main light source was taken on an overcast day. I believe it was I think it was when the Joker shoots the guy with the pen outside the hall in the first movie, but I could be incorrect about that. But anyway, Two-Face has studio lighting with the makeup, so what I did was just adapt the shadowing from the Billy Dee Williams photograph onto Two-Face. Now, I took some liberties, of course. It's art after all, and you don't have to be bound by your reference completely. I mean, if you're going for a one-to-one photograph replication, then yes, I suppose you are. But in my opinion, that's not the point of art. The point of art is an interpretation of reality. It's the way you see things. If you want to get something real, like 100% realistic, especially if you're working in comic art, this is all just my opinion. If you're an artist who's dedicated to hyper-realism and you want to go and beat me up, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Anyway, okay, now we're getting to the Copic dying stage. And what I did is, again, basing it on the light source of the photographs. You pick the skin tones that are appropriate, and in this case, I started from lighter to darker, and you apply the light color as evenly as possible. Then you apply the dark color, and then what I like to do is go back in with the previous color and blend the edges. And then you apply a third progressively dark color, but you go back to that second color. And I really should have put a graph up here, but it's getting late. This piece took a lot out of me. Just kidding, this one was a lot of fun. And in a way, it's funny, drawing a piece like this about a hypothetical movie that could have happened but ultimately didn't sort of fits in my opinion, with the whole reason that we're making Spider-Man 4 in the first place, to kind of try to write that or show fans, hey, this is what could have been. It's something that's always fascinated me. Like, I always wanted to see how the canon Spider-Man movie would have turned out, for example. And, in the future, I would absolutely love to direct a version of Batman Triumphant. It would be far less Joel Schumacher and far more Tim Burton. But just to kind of... The stories to me about what could have been really does fascinate me. And I think, as I said earlier, that I would have loved to have seen Billy Dee Williams portray Two-Face, because we saw him as Harvey Dent, and I thought he did a good job. But sadly, we didn't get to see how obviously that he would have portrayed the role. I think that he probably would have played really well off of who Tim Burton wanted the Riddler to be in Batman Forever, and that would have been Robin Williams. And I can go either way on that one personally, because growing up as a kid, I thought Jim Carrey was absolutely perfect in the role, and it's still a tremendous performance. Like, yeah, it's very wacky and very over the top, but growing up as a 90s kid, it was good enough for me. That's what we were really into. Actually, the funny thing is, in a lot of my film work, I tend to use a lot of bright colors, really saturated things like that, and I always wondered where that came from. And a couple of years ago, I watched Batman Forever again, and I'm like, oh, yeah, because I actually wore out the VHS tape that my family used to own. Now, going in here after the Copic dye layers, which turned out pretty well, but I wanted that extra oomph, that extra bit of realism. So I just went in with colored pencils, and with colored pencils you get a lot more texturing and a lot more detail. It's easier to go darker and get more rich colors in there, but going lighter with colored pencils is considerably difficult. The white colored pencil that I used gave some leeway, but not a ton. I haven't used Prismacolor yet, though I hear wonderful things about them. Mostly I use a Faber-Castell. I hope I'm saying it correctly. But drawing a piece like this, and the ironic thing, giving my talk of realism earlier, was that I think in comic art, it's an interpretation of reality. It's an exaggeration. Comic books and comic book characters show us, mostly in superhero and sci-fi or fantasy comics, they show us the extremes of what people can be or shouldn't be. Like, we get the ultimate heroic figures like Superman, or who is presented in a lot of stories as a moral ideal, and then we get the Joker, who claims he is the worst of society. So the level of exaggerations in those scripts, I think that the art needs to match. That's at least my personal soapbox. But yeah, and also going in with the clothing, as I've said in my other videos, being really mindful of textures, like the texture even on the two different sides of Two-Face's skin have to look different than the texture of his clothing, his hair, everything like that. So in his clothing, we have multiple layers. We go from a dress shirt, a button-down shirt, which I'm pretty sure he threatens the tailor to make those. I don't know how, but you just kind of go with it. And these costumes are they're directly referenced from the finished runs in the Joel Schumacher movie. And here we go. Here's Billy Dee Williams as Two-Face, and Billy Dee Williams is also a tremendous artist, so I'd encourage you to check out his work. Now, I know I say I have a lot of fun drawing these, but honestly, this has been one of my favorite pieces to work on in 2020. I have a lot of requests to do more superhero stuff. I'm going to be doing an Iron Man Mark 42, the 1970s Spider-Man, the American version. I might throw the Japanese version in there too. Another person wanted me to draw a teenaged Wonder Woman, and that will be an interesting challenge. And I'm also going to be drawing more Spider-Man 4 content coming up really soon. I'm going to be doing a fun drawing of J. Jonah Jameson and giving some info on the film, the role he's going to play and stuff like that I think you'll all enjoy. But in the meantime, keep telling your story.